of Marketing at eFolder and your host for today's event. Welcome to today's special eFolder and OpenDNS webinar. Today's topic is Managing the Threatscape, Security and File Sync Briefing. This webinar will cover the evolving Threatscape and how partners can protect their clients' security by deploying cloud-based network security and business-grade file sync. Today we are joined by Dima Kumetz, Senior Product Manager at OpenDNS. Before we go through the agenda, let's cover a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. The recorded version of the webinar will be made available on eFolder's YouTube channel. We will also make copies of the slides available to those who registered for the event. With over 333 people registered for today's session, we have put all participants in listen-only mode. You can enjoy the audio portion of today's event by either streaming it on your computer or by dialing in over the phone. Questions are strongly encouraged throughout. We have planned a special Q&A section at the end of today's discussion, but you may submit them as we go along and we will try to address your questions on the fly. Let's look at today's agenda. First, I will introduce Dima, who will tell us about OpenDNS's cloud network security services. Dima will go over the evolution of the threat landscape, including early stages of attacks, the risk and cost of malware, and modes of prevention and containment of network security threats. Finally, Dima will discuss how you can offer security as a service to your clients. After Dima's portion of today's webcast, we will move into why partners are uniquely positioned to deliver secure business-class file sync services to their clients. We will look at some of the big technology trends that are impacting you and your clients, including rogue applications and the risk of consumer-grade file sync services. We will then introduce eFolder Anchor, the only business-class sync service built from the ground up for IT service providers. Now let me introduce my friend Dima. Dima Kumetz is Senior Product Manager for OpenDNS. He manages OpenDNS's managed service provider security offering, Umbrella for MSPs. Dima has been working in technology for over 20 years with expertise in security, IT services, and emerging technologies. He is a frequent presenter at technology conferences and recently won Best Breakout Session for a security talk at ConnectWise IT Nation 2014. Dima, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ted. Really excited to be here.
Okay, I'm going to make you the panelist so you can share your screen.
Okay, just 1 second. Sorry for the delay here. All right. Do you all see the correct image?
We can.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Ted. As Ted mentioned, my name is Dima Kumetz. I'm a Senior Product Manager at OpenDNS. And for those of you not familiar with OpenDNS, we're the world's largest global security network. This slide is actually inaccurate. We're now seeing over 70 billion DNS queries per day and roughly 2.5% of the world's internet traffic, which really gives us a unique global view of the internet, this kind of satellite view that allows us to analyze data in real time and find the threats that others don't see, and deliver this as Umbrella for MSPs, our cloud-delivered security service specifically for managed service providers. In a nutshell, our managed service provider offering allows you to prevent malware infections by blocking the connection from ever taking place, as well as outbound, so if a machine is infected, preventing it from being part of a botnet, and of course content filtering and phishing. When we look at our service, the core thing that I focus on is really the security ROI, which is decreasing costs, and real-world stats from our partners, this is not artificial benchmarks, is a 50 to 80% reduction in tickets and malware cleanup time. And of course, there's the opportunity for increased revenue by charging customers extra for the per-user granular web filtering, and of course, improved retention by being able to show the value, have better uptime, and have all of that data in your PSA with our API-level integrations into ConnectWise and Autotask. But the real focus of the agenda, as Ted mentioned, is talking about the Threatscape and making sure our partners and managed service providers understand how to build this into their security offering. And when we look at the changes in the Threatscape, they really closely mirror the changes in technology. We've all seen SaaS and how it's made IT easier, where it used to be that you had to spin up your own servers and bring in a whole team just to bring up an application. And now we have monthly billing models and hosted applications. And I'm sure many of you are actually part of this through providing infrastructure as a service, where you can rent servers, storage, etc., instead of buying your own infrastructure. Well, we're now in a world of cybercrime as a service, or crimeware as a service, which is really the bad actors taking those same business innovations that we've seen in IT and applying it to cybercrime. In terms of the cybercrime world, the old model was a hacker organization, and I'm sure we've all seen these security brochures with a hooded cloaked guy, and that world has pretty much gone away. That world was part of a centralized organization where the threats had to be discovered, all the infrastructure had to be brought up from scratch, and one monolithic organization had to do the entire range of the attack to monetization, which meant that they had to go after larger targets. The new model is a distributed cybercrime ecosystem where, as a bad actor, I can choose to buy or rent in a SaaS model an exploit kit or a piece of malware. There's white labeling, there's specialization, and payments from one bad actor to another for different parts of the service. And all of this is making cybercrime cheaper, easier, and allowing more actors to go after smaller targets. When we look at this ecosystem, it's a full-on economy. Job postings, payment systems. Bitcoin gets the most attention, but there's multiple systems, including web money, that's still being used by the bad actors to pay each other. And marketplaces. Although Silk Road and Hydra and Agora are the most recognizable labels, new marketplaces seem to come up on a weekly basis as others are being taken down. And what all of this means is we've got this bustling economy. We've got lots of bad actors who are coming into the cybercrime industry, and it means that they're going after SMBs in a much more targeted, concerned way. So stat in 2013 that 41% of attacks were specifically targeted against SMBs, and Verizon research showing that organizations with 11 to 100 employees were 15 times more likely to be breached. Of course, that is the typical size of a managed service provider customer. So what does this mean to us? Well, let's look at the earliest stage of attack. And emails, of course, are a classic example. I'm sure many of you have emails, spam, phishing, etc., that are older than some of your employees. But the thing that's really evolved is the fine targeting that these emails are doing now. When we talk about targeting SMB, in this case, if I am the paralegal at a law firm or am the front desk at, say, a doctor's office, then getting a FedEx unable to deliver your package with a correct date is going to prompt me to click that link. I can't help myself. I'm not even looking at the fact this is coming from FedEx. And I have spoken to several salespeople who have fallen for the AT&T voicemail message because they think that a customer is trying to buy. They don't even think about the fact that they don't use AT&T voicemail at the office or on their cell phone. It's because these emails are getting finely crafted and specifically targeted towards the SMB audience. On the other side, there's the exploit kit. And what this really means is if I'm a bad actor, rather than having to understand all of the latest Internet Explorer, Adobe, Java, Windows, etc. vulnerabilities, I can basically go through a SaaS model where it's either between $200 to $1,000 per year, also available in a monthly subscription, plug and play this little piece of code, and now whatever website I've set up that those emails are pointing to or that malvertising campaigns are running against are just going to try them one after another, and I actually get rich analytics, which are better than a lot of enterprise-grade apps, complete with in-app purchasable new vulnerabilities. So if I'm noticing, for example, that Java exploits are no longer performing as well, I could buy additional exploits within that kit and continue my campaign. The exploit kit world is booming, and although a couple of them have been taken down recently, once again, there is that profit motive, and there are buyers who are trying to get into the cybercrime game, which means there's new specialists coming up every day to bring up these exploit kits and make infecting an end user cheaper and easier. Another thing that I wanted to brief you guys on is really this intermediate step of droppers. And this would typically happen either after the email attack or through a drive-by download through an exploit kit. But basically, instead of actually putting the really damaging, malicious piece of malware on the computer, you just put something benign that sits there and phones home. At this point, the computer is quiet, no damage is being done, but as the bad actor, I have an inventory of machines that I can then push more new malware on, whether that's ransomware, keyloggers, spam bots, DDoS attacks, etc. And I actually will resell these to other bad actors who don't want to spend their time getting people infected, who just want the actual attack to take place. And I can do this with a pretty fine level of granularity. So I can see which operating system has the higher infection rates. I can go online and post, hey, have computers, United States and Brazil, and even right down to the antivirus that's installed in the machines. When we look at this in a real-world example, and this is actually a screenshot from a dark web forum, there's even closeout sales where for $60 you can buy infection rights to 1,000 machines, and by the way, WMZ is web money dollar equivalent, and in 10 minutes after payment, your spam bots get installed on those thousands of machines. In other examples, they do something more like a real-time auction, kind of like advertising, but the end result is that there is this bustling economy, and this is creating the explosion of malware that I'm sure all of us are seeing and feeling. So onto the malware payload. What is actually going onto the machines? And the thing that I think is the most damaging and most malicious is actually the keylogger spyware family. You know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but the basic idea is machine is infected. It sends data back to the command and control server with credit cards and bank credentials, and the bad actors are sometimes extracting cash out on their own, and other times reselling this on the marketplace. An example of this type of malware is SpyEye. And SpyEye is an older one, but has the ability to, do QA. Do you only want credit cards with the CVV? Or look for credit cards that aren't expired, which is, pretty interesting in terms of the level of sophistication. But the reason that I talk about SpyEye is because SpyEye actually did get shut down, which means we have data. And the data that we have on SpyEye is this one small part of the sort of spyware family was being sold for between $1,000 to $8,500 as a perpetual license, over 150 clients that have compromised over 10,000 bank accounts. And there's even a testimonial of soldier who reports to have made $3.2 million in financial fraud. This is really eye-opening data, and I think when we look at the entire big picture of this family, the ramifications are far bigger. What's enabling these families to really thrive are things like carding marketplaces. So when the researchers actually found the Home Depot breach, it wasn't because of an exhaustive research into Home Depot's network. It was because there was a flood of high-quality credit cards going into carding sites, and for $2 to $25, you could buy up these credit cards and say I was a just small-time regular old gangster, I could then have my guys on the street charge these up. Or if you're the bad actor running a keylogger piece of spyware, then I don't need to worry about how to get cash out. I can sell them wholesale. On the bank account side, of course, this is the most horrendous but most unreported part of the attack, where we definitely see tons of small businesses being breached, having money pulled out of their bank accounts, and then losing the court cases trying to get it back, but they're not making the evening news. As a movie theater that loses $81,000 or an accounting firm that loses $164,000 isn't national attention getting, but at the same time would probably mean the difference between making payroll or not and the solvency of that business. These are the types of things that really make spyware and keyloggers so awful and so impactful on small businesses. And the other part that, of course, is getting more attention from the MSPs because of the time spent is ransomware. Ransomware is, as a category, not that new. I'm sure we all remember fake antiviruses and what a pain those were, but ransomware has evolved. An interesting evolution of this is this FBI ransomware, where basically your browser gets locked, tells you that, hey, there's porn in your history or illegal content, sometimes popping it up, and then says, we're the government, and since it's your first offense, we're going to let you pay a fine through your computer instead of throwing you in jail. To you and me, this just seems pretty preposterous, that you'd go to 7-Eleven to buy a money pack card and pay the federal government that way. It's actually never been that easy for me to pay the federal government anything. But this is working, and there's even an evolution of this which now captures your webcam and shows you a mugshot of yourself, that you must now pay up, and not only do they have your computer, but they know what you look like. This has been localized to, I believe, 36 languages at this point, and is actually becoming a very popular form of ransomware attacks, although with fairly little lasting damage to the computer. On the damage to the computer, the crypto virus has been the bane of many service providers and IT departments' existence. It started off with CryptoLocker, but has evolved into a multitude of copycats. And its typical workflow, pretty standard: infect a machine with an early stage, so email, drive-by downloads. Malvertising has become more heavily used, where ads running on legitimate ad networks and legitimate websites are being redirected to drive-by download sites as well as droppers. And then the ransomware typically will phone home to get the encryption key and let the command and control server know that an attack is beginning. At that point, one thing that's important to note, that encryption may take hours to days, but we'll try to encrypt the local machine as well as any right available network shares, and finally ransoming the user. So having talked about kind of some of the threats and infection vectors, how do we prevent and contain these infections and improve our efficiencies? Well, I always talk about the need to focus on the full infection process rather than looking at a specific named threat or specific file. And that's really because the old security approach of signature-based antivirus and firewalls can't keep up with something as simple as crypto tools. So crypto tools, and there's a little screenshot of one right now, are really cheap pieces of code, and they're being advertised on the open web as bypass 35 antiviruses in under 3 minutes. Many of them have even more robust lists. But basically, they take your standard binary, your commodity piece of malware, they inject white space, they encrypt portions of the file. So now the file signature looks different. Some of them even have the ability to move how memory is being utilized and things like that. And the goal is to make your commodity piece of malware into a zero-day threat. And what these cryptors do is they actually do this once, run it through a whole suite of signature-based tools, see what the detection rate is, And if the detection rate is still too high, then just run it again and again and again and again until your piece of malware is now either fully undetectable or undetectable enough for that cyber criminal to be able to turn a profit. Analysts have been talking about signature-based tools as being 30 to 50% effective for years, since 2011. So that's why we really focus on strengthening security beyond signatures. It's looking at network traffic to block the full infection chain by blocking sites with exploit kits at the network layer, preventing phishing attacks from taking place, and doing this across all ports and protocols, and even when it is a piece of malvertising that's embedded inside of a page. The flip side of this is containment, which a lot of people are talking about as the new prevention. So when we talk about containment, it's that critical outbound portion of preventing the dropper from getting an additional piece of malware to install, or even that initial one, stop the spyware and keyloggers from exfiltrating the data, and preventing ransomware from getting encryption keys. And in our case, we think that it's important to do this containment, but since there's still cleanup work that needs to be done, it's also important to create an alert ticket within the PSA that then gets updated if the infection still takes place. And that way, MSPs can clean up the infection while it still takes minutes rather than hours. So what do we actually do to uncover these infection vectors and callback vectors? Well, what we call it is predictive intelligence. And that means taking the now 70 billion DNS queries we see per day and running it through automations on a 1-minute cycle that look at this huge amount of traffic and figure out where threats are today and where they're going to be brought up in the future. The actual technology that I'm talking about has lots of different AI machines that are running, but 3 examples are lexical analysis. So, for example, looking at whether a domain is human-generated or computer-generated. krz77lmnop.ru would not be a human-generated domain, and our DGA lexical analysis will be able to pick that up and block that preemptively. Another model is co-occurrence. So if my computer goes to malicious domain A, then unknown domain B, domain C, domain D, and Ted's computer does the same thing, the AI and algorithmic learning machine would pick that up and would start inspecting the other domains in the chain and start blocking them as being part of an attack thread. And the last part is this core internet routing. So as a bad actor who's trying to get hardware or network connectivity, you can't just go to Rackspace and sign up with your Amex. Typically, there's autonomous systems and network providers that are either knowingly or unknowingly being used by bad actors to set up their sites, and the bad actors are setting up their current attacks while also bringing up new IPs and new servers as warm sites and cold sites to prepare for the next attack. So by being at the center of the internet with our globally distributed infrastructure and DNS services, we're able to see what else is being hosted on those sites and block them before they become part of an attack. So those are some examples of the technologies, but how do you build security as a service within the managed service provider offering? Well, we talk about this as really a risk management and mitigation strategy. And when talking about security, I like to use the analogy of bulletproof glass. In bulletproof glass, there's no such thing as a single layer of super material that's bulletproof and stops everything, nor is it a super thick piece of glass. It's multiple layers of the right materials sandwiched together in the right way. And in that stack, of course, you've got the email security and endpoint AV and firewalls, even though those are taking on less of the efficacy. And then OpenDNS as that network layer security service, that predictive layer of protection, and file sync, backup, and BDR as the really assurance level of risk mitigation and management. Now, earlier today, I talked about security ROI, and that as being our focus. And while offering protection is what we do, the value that we provide to our service provider partners is really in being able to cut down the reactive time. And there was recently a case study that we did with Myris IT over in the UK, where they had 7,500 managed endpoints and were able to basically take 2 full-time equivalents off of just doing re-imaging, not even talking about responding to the tickets, by deploying Umbrella. If you want to learn more about this, I'll have the URL at the end of my deck. But the other thing that I want to talk about, though, is an issue that we've not addressed yet, and that's shadow IT, which is another security risk. So shadow IT sounds nefarious, but in reality, it's employees who just want to use cloud services without bugging anybody and roll it on their own. However, there was a recent study that by SailPoint that brought some very interesting stats to light. So 2/3 of employees reporting that they have access to corporate data after leaving. 1 in 4 employees that would admit that they would, that they're planning on taking data with them when they leave the job. And this is salespeople taking their contacts with them. This is engineering taking blueprints and their past work with them, etc. And all this is coming from people using cloud applications without IT knowledge, without proper access controls for corporate data. And the risks to the customer are, of course, data leakage, compliance, and reduced productivity through not having a shared application to share data with. But to the MSP, it's getting surprise tickets, missing out on revenue from selling your own offering in that space, and potentially client loss. Because if a client does get breached through one of these services that you're not aware of, you may be unfairly blamed because that is something that is part of, your proactive offering and knowledge of the customer. So what we talk about at OpenDNS is the first step towards control is visibility. And in our security offering, we include, at no additional cost, the Cloud Services Report. Simple report that shows you the cloud services that are in use on a customer's network or off network, gives you the ability to look at trending of what's new, as well as filtering by specific cloud service type. So for example, I could look for CRM or file sync. And then if I drill down into a cloud service, I can see which domains are being associated with that service and which identities, so which endpoints and users are specifically using that and how often they're using the service. This makes it easier to do compliance and do checks, where instead of having to have your most senior engineer looking at logs and writing regular expressions, you're now looking at a pretty GUI report that shows you that data and allows you to show it to the customer in an easy to digest way. But it also helps to identify security risks. So for example, when HipChat, LinkedIn, and Dropbox were recently breached, this would be an easy way to figure out which users are accessing it, not just through an application installed in their machine, which RMM allows you to do, but through the browser and through any other way to give you a complete picture of who's at risk and who needs to have some credential management. And the final part is really the ability to change the sales conversation when you are offering an alternative to those shadow IT services. So rather than going in saying, Mr. Customer, you really need cloud file sync, you can look at the report and show up saying there's users who are already using Google Drive and these ones are using Dropbox. And the conversation is now about the value of a business-grade, MSP-managed, secure offering in this space, which can cut the sales cycle and shift the conversation from being one about just mere, this is a really cool tool, to we are watching out for you and we are giving you this MSP-managed offering to protect you better. Just to kind of sum it up, It's security in today's world requires staying ahead of advanced attacks and moving to a predictive model as opposed to signatures. It also means protecting users whether they're on and off network and keeping an eye on shadow IT. And with our umbrella service, you're able to deliver worldwide coverage in minutes to our IPs and then registering the external IP of that site. Or we have a lightweight agent which can be deployed in any RMM, and we actually have pre-written scripts for most RMMs that gives you not only coverage off network, but also gives you per computer granularity with those fine-grained controls. We also make it easy to do business with us with monthly billing, volume pricing, full multi-tenancy, and the ability to manage seats on demand, and something that's not included in this, the ability to create multi-tenanted settings that span multiple customers and allow you to be far more efficient as an MSP. And with that, before I turn things over to Ted, just want to mention that if you are interested in a free trial, please go to opendns.com/MSP and you can find out more about the service, or feel free to email me at dima.kumets@opendns.com.
Okay, Dima, great stuff. Everybody, if you've got questions for Dima, please please type them in the Q&A feature, and we will address your questions during the special Q&A section. What I want to do at this point is kind of change gears and kind of dive back into that shadow IT topic that Dima introduced, and really just kind of pick at it a little further. I mean, I think Dima did an excellent job of sharing with you today all the various risks that your clients face today through this very diverse threat ecosystem. But one of the really huge challenges is right under our nose. I mean, shadow IT is really a massive risk because it's been adopted en masse. Services like Dropbox have really caught the consumer's imagination with how content and productivity is supposed to happen. And you know, a service like Dropbox is really pioneered you know, file sharing and sync and collaboration, but did it in a very unsecure manner. I mean, the service was designed for consumers primarily to share photos, to do it easily, to share high-resolution content very easily because email was an outmoded technique. And the reality is most small businesses today have really antiquated remote access capabilities. And people hate their VPNs. People don't use them correctly. They're frequently broken. They're a huge administrative burden for many MSPs and their clients. And so consumers will just bring consumer-grade sync services into the workplace. And the huge challenge is that these consumer-grade sync services, in no time, corporate data ends up on these public cloud services. Corporate data ends up synced to uncontrolled devices, PCs and Macs and home offices, on uncontrolled tablet devices. And in no time, you've really got chaos underway. And it's really a Wild West type scenario today where many, many MSPs have put in place firewalls and all this, you know, very sophisticated security technology, and the corporate data is zooming out of the organization onto these public cloud services. So the beauty of what the OpenDNS solution does is just one of the many functions it has, and one that comes standard is the ability to have visibility over all the different cloud applications that are flowing through your client's networks. And I'm going to talk to you in a moment about eFolder's Anchor service, and partners will often ask us, well, how do you sell Anchor? How do you sell business-grade file sync? And really, my advice to partners is that business-grade file sync, it's always a security sale. If you don't care about security, if you don't care about data privacy, if you're not worried about data leakage as a risk, use a free consumer-grade file sync service. However, any business out there today needs to be concerned about data privacy and security. And so MSPs and your clients need a business-grade file sync solution that can be managed and controlled by an MSP. And that's what Anchor is. Anchor is a file sync solution that has business-grade features and was built from the ground up for MSPs and IT service providers. It really starts with multi-tenancy as a capability. So a picture always tells 1,000 words. And here you have a depiction of the Anchor service running in the eFolder cloud, and you've got client A and client B. That's kind of the first fundamental distinction between what Anchor does versus a lot of their services in the market, is we designed Anchor to meet the needs of an MSP. An MSP, your biggest challenge at the end of the day is your cost of labor. You need to manage a growing client base to keep your revenue growing and your profits high and attractive. And as you scale on more clients, you need to do it in a very low labor manner, low labor cost manner. You need to scale that and have a global view of your clients. And so Anchor supports a true multi-tenant interface where you're able to discretely organize accounts under organizations, client A, client B, and client C, and so on. You're able to cascade permissions across those different organizations and uniquely manage the security requirements and data privacy requirements of discrete organizations and users. So that's kind of a fundamental capability. But at the end of the day, productivity is what's driving employees to bring consumer-grade file sync services into the workplace. And Anchor behaves in very similar fashion. You're able to sync content between workstations, laptops, mobile devices. We support iOS, Android, and Windows Phone devices, Windows and Mac devices, and we support the ability to sync content from a file server to the cloud and then subsequently to different users. Sharing is also another huge requirement in the business market. And when we say sharing, there's lots of different kinds of sharing use cases. You need to be able to share large files. You need to be able to share content securely. And so Anchor supports the ability to share content. A licensed user can share content with a guest user, an external user, and do that in either a public fashion where all you send them is a URL, or you're able to send it to them as a secure fashion where you force the guest user to create a username and password to retrieve content or to collaboratively work in a folder that's hosted in the cloud. So I'm going to go through some of the detailed functionality, but Anchor at the end of the day allows MSPs to go out there, weed out the security risks at your clients, but then put in place a business-grade and secure alternative that you can manage and control and make very attractive profits. So let's go through really quickly the different capabilities of the Anchor service, just so it's clear. So first of all, syncing and sharing. So when you install Anchor on a FAT client, a Windows or a Mac machine, you'll end up with a sync folder on the machine that will go into the favorites, and it's depicted here. And then all of the content in the sync folder, whether it's the individual user's private sync folder or team shares, all of that content gets synced to the cloud and then synced to other devices that the user has been authorized to sync with. Here you have an example of my iPhone. So you have the generically branded sync tool icon on in this case an iPhone device. All of the content that I work on a day-to-day basis is there accessible on my mobile device. I'm then able to open that content, read it. I'm able to share it quickly. So the on-the-go professional, I mean, one of the main use cases when you're on mobile is you've got a colleague, you've got a client, you've got somebody you're collaborating with, and they urgently need you to get them content. And you're on the road, you're traveling, you're out at lunch, you're out at a client meeting, and you're able to whip out your mobile device and within moments securely transmit that content to that person or simply send them a large file or what have you. This is just a crying user need that really, up to just a couple of years ago, was not easily solved on mobile. And with the right software tools today, you're also able to edit content from your mobile devices, such as iOS phones and tablets. And then all of the content is accessible from the web. So everything gets synced to the eFolder cloud. And then a licensed user with their username and password can go to a web browser anywhere in the world and access their content and be productive on the go. Another really killer app, in our view, is file server enablement. You know, the traditional problem with file servers is that for the users who would be at headquarters, everything would work very well. You're on a fast LAN environment, all the folders are mapped correctly, permissions are already configured, and everything works beautifully. The problem is remote users would have problems with VPNs, have problems accessing the file server. What you would end up oftentimes is really critical business content that should have been on the file server to be siloed off on remote users' machines, and it would really drag down collaboration and data security in many organizations. With Anchor, what you're able to do, you're able to actually map the file server or cloud connect the file server, and then map folders on the file server to team shares in the Anchor service, so that remote users, all of their content is synced in real time back to the file server. Remote users are in the know and are able to access critical content from the file server, and everything stays in sync. And the way you do that is you simply identify folders on the file server that are mapped logically to team shares in the Anchor service, and in that way everybody, remote or headquarters personnel, can stay in sync. The Dropboxes of the world will tell MSPs, we'll rip out your client's file servers. And Anchor, we just simply don't believe that. The future is now, and it's a hybrid future. And all of your clients have legacy infrastructure in place. They've got file servers work beautifully in many situations, but it's often the mobility and remote user challenges which you're trying to address. And with Anchor, you're able to leverage that in-place infrastructure and get all the benefits of mobility and productivity and collaboration with remote users and employees. Sharing is a critical function. The way sharing works, just to provide a screenshot so it's clear, all you have to do is take any file that's already been synced, right-click on it, and then you're able to share it with any user. You have a choice with any sharing exercise of either doing a public share. A public share takes the content that's been synced to the cloud and provides a public URL. The important thing about a public share is it better be a public piece of content, because all the recipient or any unauthorized recipient needs is that URL to access that content. So you never want to send something that's sensitive with a public share, because that all you do is you simply copy that URL, drop it into an email, and the recipient of that email can send it on to anyone else. However, in what you often want to do in a business setting, say in a professional services environment where you've got a tax accountant who's working with their clients on a tax return, you want to be able to create a dynamic collaboration space with that user and send them a request to create a guest user account. And with Anchor, that guest user doesn't need to be licensed. So you would sell a license to your CPA clients, and then all of their downstream clients wouldn't need to be licensed on Anchor when there's a secure share request to that recipient. And you're able to have really rich controls. You can control download limits. You can be notified on the download. You can control read-write access to the collaboration space, all of that with Anchor. We also support an Outlook plugin, which behaves extremely well and seamlessly fits right into an Outlook install, and you're able to go in and share your synced files very effortlessly right inside of Outlook. Anchor also includes a backup feature, a basic file-level backup capability. So any of the content on a machine that is not in the sync folder can be specifically identified by the user or the admin or the MSP for backup. So this happens in real time. It's not a scheduled backup, but you simply go in and identify the folders on a machine or the specific files that you want to back up to the Anchor service, and it happens right in the background without any user intervention. You're also able to do mass restorations and versioning of content. So, in fact, if a machine ever gets crypto-lockered, if something happens, you're able to actually do a mass revision rollback of the content from a user's machine, and you're able to do that all with Anchor. So backup is an included capability with the Anchor service. And then administrative features, the MSP, you as the MSP are able to discreetly organize your clients and the users underneath those, and then control the security settings at the organization, account, or user or machine level. You get a complete audit log of all the content, where it's gone, how it's been used by every user that's licensed in the system. And all of the content, if you elect to go with the public cloud version of Anchor, resides in eFolder's world-class data centers, where all of the data is encrypted with 256-bit AES encryption and is secure in our cloud environment. So just to kind of make some final comments here, Anchor was designed from the ground up for MSPs. We support ConnectWise and AutoTask integration, Active Directory integration for authentication, and the service is HIPAA compliant. Partners can elect to either leverage what we call the SaaS version of the product or the public cloud version of Anchor, where we include cloud storage in the eFolder cloud plus the software, or partners can license the private cloud version where you just license the software and you provision your own storage. The service is completely brandable. You're able to put your logo on the service and make it your own. If you have a large strategic client, you also are able to brand their specific installation as well. So just to wrap up, Anchor supplies MSPs with a business-grade file sync alternative. You're able to deal with the problem of shadow IT, but you don't just block the users who want to be productive and have their content when they're mobile on the go. You block out the risky consumer-grade services and put in a business-grade, secure, and manageable alternative that's designed for MSPs. And you're able to profit with it. eFolder, we support a channel-only sales model. We sell the service to you wholesale. You're able to put your own name on it, and we help you get busy and productive very quickly with deploying this service to your clients. And from just a pricing and packaging perspective, today the street price of a business-grade file sync solution, unmanaged, is about $15 per user per month. That's what you'll find from Box, which is a good reference point. And the reality is, though, most of our partners today, they don't want to deliver something that's unmanaged. They want to actually go in and handle the security consulting, the deployment, the adds, moves, and changes, the security incidents on behalf of a client, and we strongly encourage our partners to charge a premium for that. You should be charging at least $20 per user per month for that sort of service offering. And then the other way to look at it is really to bundle Anchor in with your overall managed service offering. In our view, things like VPNs and SharePoint, and there's a bunch of outmoded collaboration and remote access technologies today that really can be supplanted completely by a managed Anchor deployment. And so we see this as a key feature in an overall managed service offering. And this is where you go in, you don't really resell it. You just add functionality to your clients, and at renewal time, you raise their price, you advertise the benefits of the scope, increased scope, and you charge more, and that's how you capture really good gross margin recurring revenue from your clients. And I think if in talking with Dima and the OpenDNS folks, that's exactly their recommendation around the umbrella service as well. By putting in these services, you're going to be able to reduce costs for your clients, add tons more value, and whether you increase the price or not, you're going to be saving money because you're going to be able to manage your clients better. But we also believe you should add features and capabilities on there so you can charge more on a monthly recurring basis. Just to give a slight introduction to the Anchor service, it starts at $10 per user per month wholesale, but at higher volumes gets down to anywhere around as low as $5 per user per month on a wholesale basis. So we encourage you, if you are interested in what you've seen today, either from OpenDNS or from Anchor, to engage with our sales professionals after today's webinar. There is a free trial of Anchor available. Just go to anchorworks.com/download, and you can elect to trial either the SaaS or the private cloud version of the product. So with that, what I want to do is open up our Q&A log here. So for anyone on the line, please, now is a good time to submit your questions. And let me go into the Q&A log and pick a couple. Dima, Lars has a couple questions. He says, good presentation, and I understand the content, but how do we pitch this to clients? Is there a brandable end-user slick we can use, or client-facing video? What kind of how does OpenDNS help MSPs have the similar conversation with their clients?
Sure. So, of course, there's a co-brandable data sheet that you can use, but really the focus that I think MSPs need to bring to the conversation is to move away from the antivirus technology issue of what do we do to protect our computers and engage on a business level. And the slides that I presented today are available, and please reach out to us and I'd be happy to share them. And the real advantage of having the conversation with the business owner is that you can improve the value of your managed service and of the client relationship by starting the conversation with, we see risk to your business, whether it's data loss, shadow IT, or your bank accounts being compromised, or productivity loss. And this is what we are doing to build that bulletproof glass multi-layer risk mitigation strategy. And when you go to market with that fully layered approach as a risk mitigation strategy, that's when you become really sticky and become the person that the customers can turn to when you find out that additional layers need to be added or that layers need to be swapped out.
Right, and I think one of the questions, I mean, it's really, I always talk about, you know, business-grade file sync being kind of selling it as like a 1-2 punch. You've really got to have that security conversation. You really got to go into the client. A lot of, I mean, a huge opportunity is existing clients. We have MSP partners who run very good businesses today that literally have thousands of users, and they've gone in using tools like OpenDNS and have discovered that there are many, many risks looming inside of their client base because of kind of the unregulated use of these cloud applications. And so you really got to go in. That's your calling list. If you're trying to figure out, well, who's a good candidate for a business-grade file sync solution, that's your calling list, is the organizations today that have the most unregulated use of cloud applications. But Scott,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, if I can just add a little bit more color to that, what Ted is talking about, the unregulated use of file sync from, you know, consumer-grade services, it's really also about, I think, relating it in ways that the customer can understand. That if an employee wants to take their customer list home with them to get some more work done, they might share it with themselves, but once they leave the organization, nobody remembers to unshare that customer list or that proprietary data. So it really is all about mitigating risk in understandable ways, whether it's your data in a HIPAA context being leaked out on the public internet, or former employees who have moved on to competitors that would now retain access to the most sensitive of sensitive lists.
All right. And Scott asked a question, what do you mean by business-grade file sync? How does it differ from non-business grade? So let's just go through a couple distinctions. A consumer-grade service, you can't control, for instance, which devices a user can sync to. With Anchor, you can. You can go in and say, on a particular user or organization, you could say, well, I'm going to let them sync from their Windows corporate-issued laptop to their iPhone, but that's it. They cannot sync to a home-based Windows host or Mac. They can't sync to a tablet. They can't sync to an Android device or a Windows Phone device. So you can go in on a fine-grained basis, control where users sync their content to. Number two, you've got a really fine-grained audit trail of where all of your content has gone. So even, you know, it's always a balancing act. Letting a user sync, like in my case, I sync between my corporate-issued laptop and a personally owned Windows host in my home office. Now, the reality is that provides me tremendous productivity benefits because I'm able to work on a big, beefy desktop here in my home office when I'm here on occasion. But the company has visibility to that. And it's a balancing act. It's not a Wild West type scenario. So you're actually able to control and audit and know where your content's gone. And then another core piece of functionality that distinguishes a consumer-grade service from a business-grade service is remote wipe. So if a user does leave the company, you can very proactively go in there and remove all of the content that's been synced to mobile devices and FAT clients proactively and wipe that content off of their machine. So those are some things that distinguish a business-grade service and a consumer-grade service. And really the critical thing is having a multi-tenant deployment model that allows an MSP to be the one who's at the controls. Dima, just a couple questions came in about OpenDNS and pricing. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So the pricing is really something that you should engage with our sales team on, because they can provide the volume pricing. But it starts around $2 per user per month and scales down from there, and is really on a per user basis. So rather than going on myself, where I have a laptop, a desktop, and oftentimes bring my mobile device in, the price is for the human being, regardless of how many devices come on the network.
Okay. Just a couple questions on the backup functionality in Anchor. It's completely configurable in terms of the number of versions, the number of file versions you want to have, so that's a configurable setting, and of course that's going to drive storage consumption. But that level of versioning is, of course, a nice business-grade piece of functionality that allows you to roll back to a known good state if ever a file or human revisions if mistakes are made. So you have that rich ability to go in and configure that. So that's a configurable setting, and eFolder, we include 100 gigabytes per user per month with the public cloud version of the product, the SaaS version of the product. And then if you were licensing the product on a SaaS basis or on a private cloud basis, you would define how much storage you would supply to your clients on your own. Okay, let's see here. Let me grab an OpenDNS question here. Can you talk a little bit, Dima? There's several questions around, Naresh asked one, and a couple questions on just how OpenDNS gets deployed with kind of existing firewalls and routers that are provisioned.
Oh,
yeah.
Sure. So the best practice is, and this can be done within the first 2 minutes of signing the customer, is pointing DNS on the domain controller or gateway to our IPs, 208.67.220.220, and that'll actually automatically connect you to the closest data center, and then changing the firewall rules so that port 53, which is the port for DNS, automatically forwards to that IP and doesn't allow anybody to go to other DNS services for circumvention. That's sort of the phase one, and then putting in the external IP in our cloud dashboard as identifying this is customer X primary office. At this point, everybody at that location gets your security settings, your content filtering settings, your completely white-labeled block page, etc., but you don't have the granularity of per-machine reporting and per-machine policy, as well as no off-network protection. So for that, the agent, which is about 2 megs, it is silent and very easy to deploy using RMMs. That goes onto each individual machine, and now that takes any DNS traffic going out of the machine and splits it between internal domains, which would still go to your domain controller, and our public IPs, which would be for all remaining traffic, as well as embedding a unique computer ID, which then maps to that organization in your multi-tenant dashboard and is identified as that specific machine. Most of our partners... Sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ted.
Well, I mean, kind of a follow-up question. Dwight wanted to know, with DNS lookup, if users are tech-savvy and machines aren't locked down, they can change the DNS server from OpenDNS back to Google or some other DNS service. Is this something that can be addressed? I mean, how does this work with the remote agent?
So if they were to simply try to go into network settings and change that, then the agent would change it back. It is a service running as system, so it will do battle with the user, but end of the day, if the user has full admin credentials and of course in the install there's the option that most MSPs take to hide it from add remove programs, but if they figure out a way to go in and kill services, then only you can get the users to comply. The real benefit of what we do is by being on the DNS layer, we're not slowing them down or creating lots of false positive issues so that users tend not to fight the service. The last part is we do have in our PSA sync capabilities the ability to notify you of these are the users or the machines that have not had traffic in the last several days, which then gives you the human approach of person has been killing their security and time to have that conversation.
Okay, great. So I think in the interest of time, you know, we don't have a hard stop necessarily, but we want to be sensitive to people's time. We advertised an hour-long webinar. So with that, Dima, we'll start wrapping up here. Dima Kumetz, OpenDNS. Dima, do you want to just give people a direction on where they should go to learn more?
Yeah, thanks, Ted, and thank you everybody for joining today. If you want to reach out to me, my email address is dima.kumets@opendns.com, or if that's too much of a mouthful, just go to opendns.com/MSP, where there's forms either to reach out to the team or to sign up for a self-service free trial without having to talk to anybody.
Okay, great. And if you want to learn more about eFolder and our Anchor service, go to eFolder.net, and one of our sales professionals can reach out to you, or you can download the free trial at anchorworks.com. With that, this is Ted Holsey with eFolder. Thanks a lot for joining us for today's webinar. Take care.